Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Shawn Ewens. I'm the Executive Director of the Healthy Start Coalition. And I want to welcome you all today to Hush Little Baby. It's a resource guide to help guide your baby to optimum sleep. Sleep is a skill that is best taught with love. In this presentation, we will help you lay a great sleep foundation for your baby, understand how to set developmentally appropriate expectations, and discuss some important aspects of safe sleep. Of course, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics. It is my honor to introduce Ashley McCollum, who is the owner of the Sleepy Tot, which is a global pediatric sleep firm which utilizes proactive and responsive sleep education to empower parents to teach their children the skill of independent sleep. The Sleepy Tot uses evidence-based methodology, which has been shown to significantly improve pediatric sleep and also strengthen the emotional attachment of the child to the caregiver. Ashley has a graduate degree in psychology with an emphasis and certifications in developmental and attachment psychology, pediatric sleep, and psychology. She has authored a book on pediatric sleep titled The Hidden ZZZ. She also teaches psychology and guest lectures at several colleges throughout the country. We want to thank you, Ashley, for joining the Healthy Start Coalition of Sarasota County, which our mission is to basically, we want to make sure that every baby born in Sarasota County has the opportunity for a healthy start in life. You can go to our website, healthystartsarasota.org, if you have any questions about our organization. And again, thank you. Any questions you might have, please put them in the chat and we'll let Ashley know they're there. And I am going to turn everything over to Ashley.
Hello, guys, and thank you so much for that warm welcome. All right, I am going to share my screen. All right. So can everybody see my presentation? We good? All right. So for starters, you kind of already read about or heard about me, but I run a pediatric sleep firm that is rooted in science, but it's also rooted in baby psychology and toddler psychology. Because if we learn about kind of the psyche of the baby, the psyche of the infant, the toddler, the young child, whatever the case may be, then we can understand better what our baby needs from us in any given scenario. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today, a lot of people hear sleep coach or sleep consultant, sleep firm, and they think, oh, cry it out. That's definitely not what we are. And we'll talk about the differences in a little bit. So if you guys have any questions at any points, go ahead and put them on the chat. I'll try to keep an eye on it. But if I'm not seeing it, feel free to unmute yourself. If I freeze or anything like that, I'm very flexible. So just feel free to holler at me if you need something. And yes, we have a book if you are interested on Amazon. Also, throughout this presentation, I'm going to be talking about a lot of different scientific studies that have been done. If you are interested in the research on any of those studies, please let me know. Just email me at ashley@thesleepytot.com, and I would love to send you those links, as well as like brief descriptors, because some of them are pretty heavy articles. So here's a rundown of what we're going to talk about today. So we're talking about from birth through the first 6 months. And then if we have some time at the end, I'll add some more about, your 6-month to toddler kind of age as well. So we want to discuss proper expectations. We want to kind of understand our child's sleep cues, understand how to respond appropriately for them, and how to gently move them towards the optimal sleep we want, which is really just getting sleep a lot of the times. I do have disclaimers in here, and the biggest one is just make sure to always talk to your child's pediatrician. Your child's pediatrician is your point person in terms of what is safe, what is healthy, what is best for a baby. So you really want to make sure that anything that you're interested in implementing, whether it's sleep training or, baby-led weaning or whatever the case may be, you always want to run those things by your pediatrician just to make sure that it's appropriate for your child. All right. So first and foremost, we have negative sleep associations. So negative sleep associations are things you'll often hear of as, oh, well, don't rock the baby to sleep, don't nurse the baby to sleep, don't do all these things. And while, yes, there is some evidence that doing some of these things doesn't give them an opportunity for learning, if we're talking about a newborn, the newborn doesn't have any skills yet. So you can't spoil a child by holding them too much. You can't, form this negative sleep association that can never be broken. So as long as it's safe for baby and if it's working for mom and dad, then that's fine. You don't need anything else. If it's not working for you or if it's unsafe for baby, that's when we want to take a look at how we can modify that behavior towards something that is desired and safe. So throughout this presentation, the big point to keep in mind, and if you're on a device where you can take a screenshot of this, I highly recommend taking a screenshot of this slide because this is going to be something we'll reference throughout the presentation. So when we look at this chart, we have age all the way on the left, then we have total sleep, so that's on a 24-hour cycle. We have average nighttime sleep. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean they're sleeping straight through. It's just kind of how many hours they're getting during the nighttime. The average number of naps they take, and then their average wake time over there on the right. The two most important columns on this whole chart are the first and the last. Reason being, when we're looking at pediatric sleep, whether you have a 2-day-old, a 2-month-old, or a 2-year-old, it doesn't really matter. If we are keeping them up too long, because especially in the beginning with those babies, with those super tiny newborns, they don't have something called a circadian rhythm yet. And so they don't have something that's inside their brain that's developed yet that tells them, hey, this is night, go to sleep. Hey, this is day, wake up. Hey, you're hungry during this time. That's still forming, and that takes at least 3 months to form. So for your first 3 months of life, for your baby's first 3 months of life, they are relying on you to set that circadian rhythm for them. That's also why we say things like to expose your baby to lots of daylight, lots of sunlight during awake times, because it helps their body start to learn that day versus night. Then you see as the baby gets older, as we go down in the rows, as baby gets older, you'll see that the total amount of sleep they need in a day goes down a little bit. We also see that their wake windows, they're going to lengthen a little bit. Okay, so for a newborn, if your newborn has gone over an hour and hasn't taken a nap, it's probably getting close to time to put that baby down for another nap. Whereas by the time they're, let's say, 6 months old, their wake window may be 2 or 3 hours in between each sleep session. So by keeping an eye on kind of what is the benchmark in terms of what's the average for my child's age, this is going to help us just kind of have a mental note or maybe a physical note. I know a lot of parents that will write it down either in their cell phone or on a pad of paper so that way they can make sure baby doesn't get overtired. Now you might ask, well, what does it matter if baby gets overtired? So what happens on a hormonal level is baby kind of goes through 3 stages, okay, regardless of age. We could be talking about 2-day-old or 2-year-old, doesn't matter. First, baby's going to get tired. Now, the first signs of tiredness are pretty subtle. It might be baby's dazing off a little bit, kind of get that glassy-eyed look. It might be that baby's eyebrows right here, that area, especially in newborns, is going to get a little bit red right around their eyebrows. You'll see kind of a ring of red going around. Okay. It might be that they're getting a little bit cranky, but again, these are subtle signs. These are the first sleep cues that baby is showing us that, hey, mom, hey, dad, I'm tired, put me to bed. If we miss those sleep cues and we don't put baby to bed, then they're going to move just into regular tired cues. And these are pretty predictable. These are when baby starts to get fussy. This is when baby, maybe is trying something new, and normally that would be fun and exciting for them, but they're just too much. It's just overwhelming. They're losing their patience very easily. That's when we know baby's tired. And this window is short. Okay, once baby hits that like tired period, you know, okay, I need to prioritize getting baby to take a nap, because if I hit overtired, it's going to be so much harder. Because once baby crosses that threshold to overtired, that's when on a hormonal level, baby's body surges cortisol, which cortisol is a stress hormone. And so it gets baby wound up, it gets baby stressed out. They also start secreting things like endorphins. So while they're very, very tired, and you know, for the parent, they might go, why aren't you sleeping? I know you're tired. They're very tired, but their bodies are jazzed up. Their bodies is getting all these hormones that saying, no, no, don't go to sleep. It's time to party. It's time to cry. And so when baby's overtired, that's when you're going to get your really intense crying. Or for older children, that's going to look like tantrums. That's going to look like obstinance. It's not that they're doing it on purpose. It's just they reach that point of overtired, and now their brain is surging those hormones, and it's making it harder for your baby to go to sleep. So if we keep an eye on those wake windows, we can try to avoid baby getting to the point of overtired. And keep in mind, whether it's this slide or anything we're going to talk about throughout this entire presentation, every baby's different. Every baby is unique. These are averages, okay? So this is what is statistically the norm. But that doesn't mean that your baby is not going to have differences. So you want to adjust accordingly, but know that kind of this is the range, this is the window that you should be trying to target. All right, then moving on to safe sleep. So these guidelines are from the American Academy of Pediatrics. These were their latest updates as of 2020. They have not published their 2021 yet. And these are things that, for the most part, are based on research. There are few things that the AAP puts out that are not based on research. An example I could give you would be, they give a recommendation that parents should room share with children until 12 months old. And that was not based on a study. That was just kind of lumped in with other recommendations they put out. And then the AAP, who put out the recommendation, later went back and said, well, past 6 months, we have found that it might actually worsen sleeping for the infant. But definitely for those first couple of months, room sharing is suggested. Now, room sharing is different from bed sharing. Okay, the American Academy of Pediatrics does not recommend bed sharing. But I will tell you, especially for nursing mothers, nursing, because of the hormones that are released when you nurse, it does make you sleepy. So if you think there's any risk of you falling asleep, we don't want to nurse on a couch. We don't want to nurse on a recliner. We don't want to nurse on a rocking chair, because those are the least safe places that a parent could ever fall asleep because of what could happen to the child. So again, these are the safe sleep recommendations from the AAP. I do know that some parents decide to, bed share with their children. If you do decide to do that, make sure you run it by your pediatrician first. Make sure to get their inputs. And also, the University of Notre Dame has put out co-sleeping guidelines that you may want to look at, because we do want to make sure that baby is as safe as possible. And we know that putting them down to sleep on their back in their crib is going to be the most safe for them. But if we're going to look at other methods of sleeping, then we just want to make sure that it is as safe as possible. And again, if you need links to anything I talk about today, just email me and I'll be happy to send them to you. All right, then in terms of the sleep environment, these are things that should take place in the room or not take place in the room that will impact baby's quality of sleep. So I'm going to run down the list, give you kind of a couple of notes about why these things are recommended. So first of all, calming environments, okay? Whether baby is room sharing with you or in their own nursery, we want their sleep environment to be free of stimulation. We don't want to have, things on the wall. We don't want to have mobiles over the crib. I know they look really cute, but they can be distracting for baby. And very rarely do they actually help with things like sleep. we want to make sure that the temperature is ideally between 68 and 72 degrees. Now, the reason for this is the temperature that has been shown to reduce SIDS. Now, I know that here in Florida, that can be a little cold for some parents. So if that's too cold for you, you can't put your house that cold, just make sure that you're dressing baby in light clothing, and we never want baby to be sweaty, to be clammy, anything like that. So if you feel baby's neck, so you reach under their little nightgown, you feel their neck, you reach down and you feel the back of their back. If baby's not sweaty, if baby's not clammy, they're probably fine. Now, their hands and their feet, their extremities do get colder than their core. That's just because their blood flow is working on getting the way it needs to be for, growth. That's normal, okay? They do have those little jammies that can flap. They have little arms that flip over their hands. That can also help with scratching. And then the little footies as well. But again, the cold hands and feet is a little more normal for babies, but we never want baby to be sweaty or clammy. That's what can be dangerous, okay? We also highly, highly recommend a dark nursery or if you're room sharing, a dark master bedroom, and have some sort of white or pink noise. The reason being, think about when baby is in utero, okay? When baby's in mommy's tummy, they are basically sleeping in the dark 24/7, and it's loud. It is very, very loud inside of your belly. So baby hears your blood whooshing by them, baby hears your heartbeat. And so because we're hearing all of these things, baby's hearing all of those things, then that is going to make a huge impact if we're putting them in a silent room. Okay, so somebody asked the question, what is pink noise? So there's different colored noise. There's pink noise, white noise, brown noise. I think there's a purple noise maybe. And they're just very different variations of, I'm going to age myself probably, but if you remember old school televisions, like the ones that you had to like crank by hand, if you went to a channel that didn't pick up a signal, that like sound, that basically is white and pink noise. Pink noise has been found to most closely resemble the sound that baby would hear in utero, but white noise is like incrementally different. So white noise, pink noise, doesn't matter between the two of them really, but one of those is going to be ideal. As far as how loud you should set it, you can see there that I have written 70 to 75 decibels. A good way to kind of keep this in mind is if you are standing outside of a shower curtain, okay? Because if you have a glass shower enclosure, it can kind of muffle it more. But if you're standing right outside a shower curtain, let's say your partner's in the shower, that's about how loud 75 decibels is. So we want to think about, if I put this sound machine in my baby's room and we do want it on all night or all nap, then we want it to be about the loudness that you would hear standing right outside of a shower, okay? And again, this is just to make sure that we're simulating a noise that is kind of familiar to baby, and it will also help muffle some of the house noise. So, if they have an older sibling, let's say, and older siblings playing and making a ruckus, then that white or pink noise machine may muffle some of the other noises that are going on in the house, which can be really helpful for baby to keep staying asleep. Sleeping space should be dark. And by dark, I do mean if you hold your hands about a foot away from your face, you shouldn't be able to see it, even in the daytime, okay? Now, a lot of parents worry about, well, won't they get night and day confused? It's not super common that will happen. And it is something where any kind of light, whether it's light from outside, so sunlight, whether it's, let's say, baby's room sharing with you and you have the TV on, but you don't have the noise on, that blue light is touching every wall in the room and it's ricocheting those blue lights into baby's eyeballs. Blue light which is the kind we see from our cell phones, from our TVs, from our computers, that is actually the worst light in terms of harming sleep. Reason is because, again, we're talking about hormones, melatonin secretion. So melatonin is what makes you sleepy. In fact, some people even get melatonin supplements as they get a little bit older if they have difficulty sleeping. And so blue light suppresses your natural melatonin production, whether you're a brand new baby or you're an adult. So anytime we have TVs going when we're trying to sleep, that can be affecting sleep, even for adults. And I'm guilty of it myself. But it is something we want to pay attention to with baby, because we want to make sure that we are setting them up for success. I got a question. Can the pink noise work with a 2.5-year-old? It can. Now, if it's a brand new noise, that might be a little disruptive for a 2.5-year-old. And with a 2.5-year-old, you want to make sure to tell them we're doing it, okay? Because after about the year mark, that's when we need to tell baby what we're doing. You know, when they're super young, when they're a newborn, they don't understand language yet. But as they get older, as they understand language, regardless of whether they're pre-verbal or verbal, they understand a lot. And so anytime we make changes without telling them, even if we think that change is going to be fun and it's going to be a surprise, that can often disrupt sleep as well. Okay. But yes, in terms of the pink noise buffering out other noises, that can be helpful even for toddlers. Okay. And then in terms of what we talked about with the blue light disrupting sleep the most, red light disrupts sleep the least. And so if we're going to be doing, middle of the night diaper changes with our newborn, for example, then getting a very small dim bulb, if it has an adjustable thing on it, even better. That is going to be the best light to use whenever we need to do those late night diaper changes, because we don't want to turn on a blue light, a white light, because those are going to disrupt sleep a little bit more than will the red lights. All right. So this is a slide. I kept it in there because it is good knowledge, and there's a bunch of study results that are cited on the bottom there. But I give this with a caveat of it's a global pandemic. So I think everybody, even every pediatrician that I work with, is a little more relaxed on this right now, because quite honestly, there's only so much you can do with a child in a pandemic if they're not going out and seeing other people. So give yourself some grace on this one. But just know that in general, the World Health Organization and the American Academy of Pediatrics have recommended that babies under 18 months should not get any screen time. Now, the exception to all of these ages is if it's like interactive screen time. So what I mean by that is like a video call. If they're, video chatting with grandma and grandpa, if they're video chatting, like my daughter does virtual music classes on the television. Those things, if they're interacting with a parent or a caretaker and they're interacting with somebody on the other end of the screen, that doesn't seem to have any of these effects. It's, if we're sitting baby or child down in front of a TV and kind of going into the other room and trying to cook or clean or do whatever, because that doesn't have any interaction time, what happens is that we, on a developmental level, if we're not participating with baby while they're getting screen time, it doesn't really contribute. Even the ones that claim that they're like learning activities for very, very small children, their learning comes from mom and dad. So if mom and dad are interacting with whatever's on the TV, that's a different story. There are some learning integrations there. But if we're just putting baby in front of a TV and saying, oh, well, it's smart mouse or whatever the case may be, that's when we don't really see that, especially with our younger children. So under toddler age, we don't really see any benefit from any of the stuff on the TV, the stuff on the computer, cell phone, things like that. This is particularly true in the hours leading up to bedtime. Okay, so if we're going to get screen time for our child, because again, pandemics, sometimes you just run out of things to do. We want to try to limit that for the 2 to 3 hours leading up to bedtime, because that's really what's going to disrupt sleep the most. So if we, want to alter it to be earlier in the day, things like that, it'll have a lesser impact on sleep. And again, if you're interested in any of these studies, I have pages and pages and pages and pages of PDF. So just let me know what you're interested in and I'll be happy to send it to you. Let me see, I got a question here. Story time on the computer before bed, trying to set the mood for 10 minutes. Is this not recommended? Generally not, just because it's before bed. If it's story time in the middle of the day, if it's story time in the late afternoon, that's not going to have as big of an impact on nighttime sleep. But if it's shortly before bed, especially in those 2 to 3 hours before bedtime, that's usually when we see the biggest impact in terms of how it's going to impact their sleep that next night. And on that note, sleep in general is thought of in the sleep coaching world, is thought of as a 24-hour cycle. Okay, so what I do right now may not impact the next sleep, but it could impact a sleep in the next 24 hours. That's why with all my consultation clients that are with me for a couple of months, every time we have something new we need to kind of alter, we get data. We get 3 to 5 days worth of data of what is, your child actually doing during all these times, because very, very often I'll look at the 24-hour cycle and the problem may be happening at 5 a.m., but that 5 a.m. is impacting things at 10 or 11 that night. So it is how it maps out across a 24-hour cycle. All right, so for the rest of the presentation, we're going to kind of divide up into segments of, we're going to talk about newborn, then we're going to talk about the first sleep regression, what happens right before then, right after then. And then, like I said, if we have some time at the end, we'll talk a little bit more about some toddler stuff as well. So if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. I'm trying to get those as best as possible as I go through. All right, so with newborns, as I mentioned before, they don't have a circadian rhythm set. So for an adult, our circadian rhythm tells us, what time to get up in the morning. It tells us when we're hungry. It tells us when we get sleepy at night. And this is something that the circadian rhythm can always be altered. Think about things like jet lag. Jet lag happens because of the circadian rhythm. Think about things like, I had a big presentation. I was just launching a video series this month. And so I was working on it for the months up to then. And I was working late nights. I was totally messing up my circadian rhythm. And it took about 2 or 3 weeks for myself, a grown woman, to get back into the routine of what my body naturally wants to do. The same is true of children, whether they're newborns, whether they're toddlers, whether they're small children. In moments where, you have company come in town, or it's the holidays, or you're traveling on vacation, or, anything that's different, that's going to mess with your circadian rhythm because it's new and exciting and it's altering the normal routine that you would be doing with your child. So to some extent, give yourself some grace because they'll get back on, especially if they had good sleeping to start with. Just expect the disruption whenever family comes in town or you go on a vacation or whatever the case may be, and know that if they had good sleep beforehand, it's not going to take a ton of time to get them back there. It's when they don't have good sleep to start off with that it can be a snowball effect. So with newborns, that circadian rhythm doesn't start establishing until closer to 3 months. So we think of the newborn phase, that 0 to 6 week, as the 4th trimester, basically, because until we start getting past that 6-week point and that 12-week point, it's all on mom and dad. Okay. And so because of that, we want to keep an eye on those wake windows. We want to be putting baby down when it's appropriate for them to be put down. We don't want them getting overtired because not only does that stress baby out, stresses the caretaker out as well. So we just want to keep an eye on that. Great question. So this question is, does prematurity play a role when circadian rhythm develops? It does. So if, let's say, so I worked with twins a couple of weeks ago, and they were 7.5 months old, but they were 5 months old adjusted age because they were born early. So if baby was carried to term, which generally in the gynecological community is considered 37 weeks is considered safe, it's considered to term. There's not going to be huge alterations there. But anything less than 37 weeks, then yes, we do want to use their adjusted age, not their due date. Okay. So like in the case of the twins that I worked with, even though they were 7.5 months old, we were looking at them as 5-month-old twins because developmentally, that's what their brain is, because the brain starts developing at conception, basically. And so if you think, what's baby's brain doing in utero, it's got tremendous growth. So even if they're born early, whether it's a little early or a lot early, as baby keeps growing, that brain and what that brain is capable of is going to grow with them. And so we do want to adjust down for their adjusted age if baby was born prematurely. So thank you for that question. That was a great one. So in terms of newborns, soothing is going to play a big role, and we'll talk about soothing on the next page. We also want to make sure that when we're soothing, we want to give each method or each caretaker at least 5 or 10 minutes. Very often what you'll see is, a very stressed out, overwhelmed, sleep deprived caretaker that's like doing this and then doing this and doing that. If we keep trying to change caretakers and methods of calming the baby, what ends up happening a lot of times, not every time, but a lot of times what ends up happening is that baby is then not really understanding, like, okay, am I calming down or are we playing? Because there's just too much change happening. And so baby is already stressed out. Let's say they're overtired. They got that cortisol hormone racing through their body. They got some endorphins going on. And then they have a caretaker that's stressed out, and baby can sense your emotions like no other. And so you got a stressed out caretaker, and then the caretaker's, bouncing real fast or rocking or handing off to another caretaker. No, that's not working. Come bring the baby back to me. What happens is baby then is getting overwhelmed by that. So even if baby's not happy with it, give it a couple minutes. Swaddling's a perfect example of this. Most babies, especially after 2 weeks old, most babies don't love being swaddled. They don't love that feeling of confinement. But then once they stop fighting it after 2 or 3 minutes, then they're like, all right, maybe it's not so bad. All right, maybe I feel cozy and snug. Okay, maybe I like it. Maybe I'll calm down. But it takes them a couple minutes. So we just want to give them a couple of minutes to figure out what they really feel about whatever the case may be. Okay. We also want to make sure that we're starting to establish a routine at this age. Okay, so we want to establish a routine for naps, and we want to establish a routine for bed. Reason being is because, again, baby doesn't have a circadian rhythm. So if baby doesn't have a circadian rhythm, they're relying on external cues to tell them when sleep is coming. And so when we change them into their swaddle or their sleep sack, that's an external cue that says, sleep is coming. When we put them in the bathtub, external cue, sleep is coming. When we nurse them or give them a bottle, external cue. When we turn down the lights, sing them a song, read them a book, whatever bedtime looks for you. It doesn't really matter what's in the routine. It just matters that they're getting that consistent routine day after day, so they start to learn, oh, okay, so I got in the bath and I'm getting my teeth brushed and I'm getting my jammies on. Oh, okay, it must be bedtime, because they don't understand time yet. So this is a way that they start to learn the process and start to anticipate what's coming, which will help us later on in life. Again, we also want to make sure that we're giving baby lots of sunlight during their awake time, not during sleep time, but during their awake time. We want to expose them to lots of natural light. Now in Florida, pretty easy to do. If you live someplace that is a little bit colder, a little bit grayer, a little bit not so sunny a lot of the year, that's fine. You know, you can either try your best with the external light or simulate it with, you know, your internal lights in the house. But we just want baby to orient to day versus night. Easiest way to do that is through light. And the sunlight gives you an extra advantage because sunlight, particularly in the early afternoon hours, so 1 to 3 p.m., that is actually going to set the body to be successful to start secreting melatonin later on in the evening. Okay, so if we have a lot of sunlight and that 1 to 3 hour, then as baby gets closer to bed, that melatonin production at the top of the sunlight is going to be down. And then as the sunlight goes down, their melatonin production is going to go up. Okay. Again, it's looking at what's happening hormonally, what's happening biologically, and trying to use that to your advantage. You'll also note the thing at the bottom, the little note about not letting babies sleep in their car seat. Now, obviously, if we're on a trip, we're driving somewhere, we're running errands, different story. Okay. But as soon as we get out of car, baby cannot sleep in their car seat. Even those bucket seats, even the infant carriers that you bring inside, very dangerous for baby to sleep in that if it's not attached to the base. Their airway doesn't open correctly. So I know waking a sleeping baby sometimes sounds like a daunting task, but it is what's safest for baby. So we want to get them out of their car seat, try as carefully as we can to then give them access to a flat, safe sleeping space. All right, then we have soothing techniques. Okay, so these are just some of the high ones. So we have swaddling. Again, with swaddling, we want to make sure that we're swaddling baby's midsection pretty tightly. We want to make sure we're keeping fabric away from their face because we don't want it covering baby's face. That would be very dangerous. And you want to make sure that their hips and their legs can move in the swaddle because we want to avoid things like hip dysplasia. So it's very important when you're at the hospital with baby, you have access to great nurses that do this all the time. Ask them to show you. Ask them to show you repeatedly. How do I do that again? Can you show me that again? They do not mind. And it's something that is a great, great skill to learn. Now, in the event you're not comfortable doing swaddling yourself, they do make a lot of cool devices that make it a lot easier. So there are several brands that make a Velcro swaddle, and you can do it arms in, you can do it one arm out, you can do both arms out, okay? The reason to swaddle babies' arms in is because in those early months, babies have what's known as the moral reflex. And so that's basically when baby's sleeping and you'll see them all of a sudden go like that. That's the moral reflex, okay? Baby gets the sensation that they're falling. And usually if they're snuggled in close, that happens a lot less. And when it does happen, because they can't move and flail, they're less likely to wake themselves up. Now, when baby gets closer to rolling over, we want to make sure we are no longer using the swaddle. In that case, we're going to switch them over to a sleep sack, which is a zippable, literally a cover that they wear. So it has armholes. It's got a big sleeping bag hole for their legs to go in so they can still move their legs. But that's going to be a safer choice because we don't want to use blankets in the crib, not pillows, not stuffed animals, not bumpers. All those things are dangerous for baby. So we want to make sure that we're setting baby up for success, but we're also doing what's safest. We have rocking, bouncing, shushing, burping. With burping, a big thing to keep in mind is that one way to burp a child may not always work. It may not always work for each caregiver, and it also may not work for each child, okay? There are some babies that doesn't matter how much you pat on them, if they're over your shoulder here, that may not work effectively. And so we want to integrate different methods of burping our baby, whether that's we're supporting their neck and they're sitting on our lap. So we support their chin, support their neck, and then we're patting on their back. That may also be that you want to lay baby down. Again, we also want to support their chin on this one. So we can lay them down on their lap, support their chin, pat their back like that. It may be that if you have a small child or long forearms or both, that we want to hold baby in a reverse football hold, where we would be supporting their chin right here. So you make kind of a C cup with your hands, support baby's chin, so that way their neck is supported, and then their tummy goes on your forearm, okay? That's a reverse football hold, and for babies in the first couple of weeks, they're super duper gassy. And so that really goes a long way in terms of relieving some of that gas pain. Same thing with leg bicycles. Leg bicycles will get some of those out. I love you massages will get some of that gas bubbles out. And so we're just looking at ways to relieve baby's discomfort while also encouraging them to get more sleep. Because a lot of the times, as we're getting towards like the witching hour at the end of the evening, that may be something that we're looking for whatever we can to calm baby down. Also, if you have an exercise ball at home, that will be your new best friend, especially with a newborn, okay? So just sit on the exercise ball and just bounce with baby on the exercise ball. And in terms of how fast you should be bouncing, whether you're doing pretty much any of this, think of the song Staying Alive by the Bee Gees. Staying alive. That's a pretty close to your heartbeat. And so that tone, or that beat rather, that's going to be as quick as you want to go. A lot of times if we're stressed out, we end up doing this, and then it just doesn't help baby or ourselves, okay? Similarly, we want to make sure we're focusing, whether baby's a newborn, whether baby's a toddler, doesn't matter. We want to focus on calming our own body, because if we calm our own body, then baby will be benefited by that tremendously. So then as we come up to our pre-regression, so until they hit about 3 to 4 months, this is when routine makes a huge impact, okay? So we really want to focus on, if we didn't set up those nighttime routines, if we didn't set up those nap time routines in that kind of 4th trimester window in the first 6 weeks, we want to focus on it now, because this will set baby up for success before they reach their first sleep regression, okay? And then every baby, unfortunately, does hit sleep regressions, okay? On average, the 4-month sleep regression and the 18-month sleep regressions are usually the worst ones. Now, that doesn't mean that your baby will have a horrible time. Every baby's different. But the 4-month sleep regression is going to happen to every child. Reason being is because every sleep regression is actually a developmental progression. Okay, so the baby is now getting a circadian rhythm. So they have light stage of sleep, whereas before they just pretty much went into sleep and fell right into REM, which is our restorative sleep. That's the sleep that helps our brains. And so when baby is young, they pretty much just go into that restorative sleep. There's not a process. At the 4-month sleep regression, which can happen anywhere from about 3 months to 5.5 months, this is when they start to experience light stage of sleep. And when they're in a light stage of sleep, they can be easily woken up either by sounds, by smells. If mom's breastfeeding, mom's breast milk, they can smell that. That might wake them up. They can be woken up by lights coming into the room. And so this is when all of those things we talked about early on now come into play. Because if we didn't establish it early on, now they have a sleep regression and they don't know how to deal with it. So if we do the skill building in the beginning, that allows us to focus more on coping with whatever comes up with the sleep regression. Now, there are a total of 8 other regressions. Not every child goes through every one of them. Not all of them are bad. And if you have a good sleeper to start with before the regression happens, on average, the regressions may be something that you might notice a little bit, but they're not going to be overwhelming. Okay, it doesn't have to, we always get scared when we hear sleep regressions of like, oh gosh, but I don't want to. It doesn't have to be horrible. Okay, so just stick to the routines, stick to what was working, and then if we need to make small tweaks during the regressions, we can do so. Okay. All right, so I do have books, coaching, et cetera, et cetera. What questions do you guys have? Feel free to unmute or put your questions in the chat. Either way, I'll see them. I'm going to stop sharing just for a second so that way we can see everybody.
Sarah, would you mind posting the post question? And we did have a question, Ashley, if you can please send out the PowerPoint.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to.
Great. If you send that on to Patricia, and we can make sure that happens. Thank you so much.
I'll write myself a note.
Oh, Lisbeth says, it looks like I didn't really set a good routine for my little boy.
That's all right. The beautiful thing about kids is that they are resilient as heck. So even if you didn't do things exactly to, you know, the way it's supposed to be or whatever the case may be, doesn't matter. If it works for them, great. It doesn't matter. If it's not working for them, they can still be modified to meet the child wherever they are. And the biggest thing again is everything you're doing, focus on approaching your child, approaching the situation, even if they're screaming, even if they're, let's say you have a 3-year-old and they're fighting taking a nap, because we don't want to drop the nap until 3 to 5 years old. Okay, so let's say you have a 3-year-old and you're like, I think you still need your nap, but your child's fighting you tooth and nail. Okay, we're not going to give in to our child necessarily. We're not going to indulge that thing that we're like, no, you still need a nap. But we do want to come at it with a sense of love, a sense of confidence, a sense of sturdiness. And we want to explain to that child, buddy, I know you're not tired. It's so much fun. You know, you're having a good time. You're playing, you're this, you're that. But our bodies do need rest. Okay. And then you might develop a reward chart for your child. You might decide to, you know, implement them in the process. So, you know, if they're transitioning to a big kid bed, for example, have them help out, have them pick out their blanket or their pillowcase, you know, get them involved as much as possible in the process, especially with our toddlers, because the more we involve them in the process and the more that we set boundaries with love and just explain them and say, listen, buddy, you're allowed to feel upset about that. You are allowed to not like it. You're allowed to cry this whole time. That's fine. You're allowed to have your feelings, but this is what we're doing. That way we're validating what they're feeling because they have a right to feel what they're feeling, but we're also letting them know this is the boundary and here's why, because this is really good for your body. You know, with our newborns, we can't really explain the why to them because they don't have the language ability. Our toddlers do. So the more that we integrate our toddlers into the process, they will genuinely benefit from that.
Well, thank you, Ashley. And actually, mentioned about make them participate in the process. So that's what I did. I was able to ask him to pick the bed and the blanket. But it's still a frustrated process for me and my husband because we spend maybe between 45 minutes to 1 hour in bed close to him to put him to bed. So it's like, what can we do? And actually, we still share the room with him. It's 2.5-year-old. And that's the other question that we have been having with my husband. So is this something that we need to keep doing? So yeah, so there is a lot of questions, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. So anytime we want to modify something, because a lot of times we think, well, maybe I just wait it out. Maybe it just resolves itself. And in about 20% of the cases, it does. But in the other 80%, it doesn't usually. So we usually need to implement some sort of different strategy. And that's going to be different for every single child. Now, I will tell you that most weeks, if you follow the Sleepy Tot on Instagram, so it's just at the Sleepy Tot, most weeks we do a Q&A. And so that may be something where, and it's totally free. So that may be something you want to go on and, try to get some questions answered in that form, because it's definitely something that you have to figure out what gets your child involved. So how do you get your child to have buy-in into whatever you're trying to change? Because if you don't have buy-in with a toddler, it's not going to happen. You will never out-stubborn a toddler. And so you look for strategies of how can I get buy-in? And then if it's going to be some sort of extrinsic thing, so if it's going to be an extrinsic reinforcement strategy, then we want it to be set up in something called a variable ratio schedule, which is basically something that there's not predictability in how often they'll be rewarded for said behavior, whether that be bed making, staying in bed all night, putting themselves to sleep. And so Google that term, variable ratio schedule of reinforcements. That's going to be what you're trying to do, whether it be a sticker chart, whether it be a chore chart, whatever the case may be, that's going to yield your best results for toddlers.
Thank you, Ashley. We have another question in the chat from Callie, and she says, at what point do sleep consults become necessary? Who decides that? The parents, the pediatricians, and are sleep consults covered by insurance?
I wish. They are not. So, I mean, obviously as a business, I have business insurance and things like that. But insurance does not cover things the way they would for like a pediatrician visit or a lactation specialist. And so unfortunately, that is not something that is reimbursable. I wish that were different, because that would make it a lot easier on a lot of parents. And in terms of who decides, it's always going to be the parents. Now, pediatricians will often suggest parents to move forward with this sleeping consulting. Particularly, we see most pediatricians after the 6-month mark. If your child's not sleeping through the night, that's when we get a lot of referrals from pediatricians. Prior to the 6-month mark, most pediatricians don't think it's an urgent enough need, unless there is some just really atypical resistance to sleep, in which case we just have to identify kind of what that is. But ultimately, it's always the parent's decision whether or not they want to move forward with working with a sleep consultant or not. And a big thing to look for is, what is the methodology that your sleep consultant uses? Here at the Sleepy Tot, we do something called proactive and responsive sleep education. That basically means that we are not doing cry it out. We're not asking you to keep your baby locked in a room for 12 hours and saying, all right, figure it out, see you tomorrow. Because we know from the attachment research that that could actually negatively impact the emotional connection that baby has to the caregivers. And so proactive and responsive sleep training is building skills during awake time and then giving them very gentle opportunities for learning during sleep times. And so that's front-loaded work for the parents, because a lot of parents are like, okay, let's sleep train this weekend. And I'm like, that's not me. Because we can't expect a child to master something that they don't have the skill set for. And so we first need to train the parents of how to train the child to possess those skills, whether it's encouraging them to use pacifiers. So if your child, you want them to use pacifiers because they reduce SIZ, they're resisting, you can play pacifier games during wake time where you move it around their mouth in circles, you pull it out a little bit, you encourage them when they suck it back in. It's really just trying to build up those muscles, the armature for that pacifier. But we're working on that during awake time, so that way we can give them gentle reminders when we do need to intervene at night. And again, above all, a parent's sense of calm, a parent's sense of sturdiness, of having confidence in what they're doing. Even if baby's screaming at them, just going, I know, babe, I know you're allowed to feel that way. Absolutely. It's okay. Having that sturdiness about you as a parent will absolutely help your child. Google the word co-regulation and you can kind of figure out some more about why on that.
Great. Thank you, Ashley. Any other questions from the group for Ashley? I know I wish I would have met you 10 years ago. That would have
Get
been
that a
very.
lot.
I still have issues with my 7-year-old sleeping. So,
and that's
this
the
was
funny thing is it's across the lifespan usually. If we
completely.
set a good sleeper in their early years, those first 3 to 5 years, that's usually a lifetime skill. But it's if they didn't get that in those early years,
Right.
then they kind of have to force themselves. Then they really are going to resist it because it's something that they've formed kind of a negative association with.
Great. Well, if there's no other questions, I do want to let the group know that the Healthy Start Coalition is going to be doing these parenting series once a month. So please keep up with our website, healthystartsarasota.org. Like us on Facebook. Please also, we're on Instagram, but we always post what we're doing and share it with your friends. And like we said, this is completely free, and this is just information for all of you out there to give you tips on our parenting series. So as you can see, the next one we have is answers to your questions about COVID-19 vaccine, which will be on Friday, March the 19th with Dr. Washington Hill. And then we will be moving into hypnobirthing Wednesday, March 3rd. And we're trying to keep these all the same times from 2 to 3, so we're consistent. But I do want to let you all know, every year we do a baby shower in Northport and Sarasota, but because of COVID, we will be having a drive-by baby shower this year at the Glasser Schoenbaum Human Services Center, which is where Healthy Start is located, and that is 17th Street, and the address is on your screen, but that will also be on our website and our Facebook page and all of that. So Ashley, we can't thank you enough for everything you provided for us today. And again, if you want more information from Ashley, it is the Sleepy Tot. And like she said earlier, that you can find her on Instagram. And do you want to put in the chat, Ashley, any other information on how to contact you?
Absolutely. I'll do that now.
Okay, great. So we'll let her do that, and then we'll go ahead and end this session, and we look forward to seeing you all our next session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was a pleasure to be with you guys today.